the number one. Just wearing the number one on your jersey sends a message to the opposing team, your teammates, and everybody watching you. And that is a message that is not to be taken lightly. Ja'Marr Chase is that one to represent the number one. And it's fitting that he is our first wide receiver to be featured on He's a Beast. Welcome back, or welcome to America's Sports. This is He's a Beast, where we focus on how players like Ja'Marr Chase have made it into beast mode, a level that they are currently on right now and rising in the sport that they are playing in. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the story of Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase was born on the 1st of March in the year 2000, straight out of Harvey, Louisiana. His father is Jimmy Chase and his mother is Tolia Chase. I do apologize if I pronounced it wrong. I did try. And throughout his football career, his parents and his siblings have always been his biggest fans. As for the siblings, Ja'Marr has 4. 2 brothers, Jimmy Chase Jr. and Terrell Chase, and also 2 sisters, Mia Chase and Taylor Goldie Chase. So I'll have to settle for the next biggest fan after them. Ja'Marr grew up with the passion and love and determination for sports. From an early age, they knew he was gifted at football. So in high school, he would of course play football, but he also was into track and field. Ja'Marr attended Archbishop Rummel High School, which is in Metairie, Louisiana, which is only about 6 miles from New Orleans. And that New Orleans and just the Louisiana connection that he had with his home state would play a pivotal role in his success and also the college he attends success. Ja'Marr would win a high school state title in Louisiana in the long jump and track and field, but that just further proves his versatility on the football field. His jumping ability, his speed, and his strength would make him an extremely versatile wide receiver from here on out. And touchdowns are his thing. Chase would end up with 30 of them in his high school career. He was a 4-star recruit and the top 15 prospect in the wide receiver position. And he was in the top 100 overall. A lot of the big schools wanted him. He would at first commit to Kansas, and then he would commit to Florida, changing his mind again and ending up at LSU. No matter how you look at it, Chase would have been a great college player, and he would have went on to the NFL as well. No matter which option he had chose, if he would have stayed at Kansas or if he would have decommitted, gone to Florida, and stayed there. But this was the most correct of choices to make. A man by the name of Joe Burrow had also first committed to another school at Ohio State. Burrow would play at Ohio State but never start, so he transfers to LSU, and Joe becomes Ja'Marr's quarterback from this point on. Yeah, it's pretty hard not to tell the football story of Ja'Marr Chase and not at least mention Joe Burrow, and vice versa. They're the best of friends today, but this would be their first year together as Chase's true freshman season begins. LSU was in the midst of building something special. Ja'Marr's first 2 years with the team would be LSU's best years since 2011. Chase would then start in 8 games this season as a freshman, and in those games, he had 313 receiving yards with 3 receiving touchdowns. But his best game for sure was in the Fiesta Bowl, biggest game of the year where he has 6 catches and 93 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. As a team, they had lost 3 games that year, all of them in the conference, including one, just an absolutely insane 7 overtime, 74-72 loss against Texas A&M at the end of the year. But I remember thinking of that as, this kind of feels like Joe Burrow's coming out party as well. I felt like it was definitely the best game that he had had in his career up to that point in college. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Chase would then have his best game of his career in the next game in the postseason. This was a great season. But next year, in 2019, my friends, this is where it gets silly. There were 2 other well-known wide receiver teammates of Chase, Terrace Marshall Jr. and Justin Jefferson. In 2018, Jefferson had the most success as a wide receiver. LSU was a run-first and defensive type of team. But in 2019, LSU's offense would explode in the air. And although everyone got to eat on this team, The main beneficiary was Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr made flexing on the field a signature of his, and ever since this season, he's been able to do that a lot, as Ja'Marr had one of the greatest college seasons of all time. Nearly 1,800 receiving yards and 20 receiving touchdowns. Pretty much the only time he didn't go off this season was in blowout wins. He had 3 games with more than 200 receiving yards. His fourth one would have come against Texas A&M, but he was 3 yards short. It was a 50-7 win, though. Getting big-time revenge on this team from last year's loss. They also got revenge on Florida and on Alabama. By the time that LSU got into the SEC championship game, the fans, media, and casuals alike all knew Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson is just a special, special group. They played Georgia in the SEC championship, and they had major success against Georgia in the 2 years that Chase was on the field for them, as they beat Georgia 37-10. LSU was then ranked the number 1 team in the country. That would earn them the number 1 seed in the college football playoffs. And those games weren't really close either. They beat number 4 Oklahoma by 35 points, and then in the championship game, they beat number 3 Clemson by 17. By the way, Oklahoma's quarterback was Jalen Hurts, and Clemson's quarterback was Trevor Lawrence. Give Clemson some credit. When you go back and watch that game, they really held it together and fought hard with LSU through about 3 quarters, more so on defense than offense in the fourth quarter, as they held Clemson to 0 in the fourth. One of Chase's 200-plus yards games would be in this national championship game, along with 2 receiving touchdowns. Possibly his best college game ever when you consider the stage that it was on. Just further solidified that he was a first-round draft pick. So if you count the postseason, this LSU team beat 7 top 10 ranked teams, and 4 of those were ranked in the top 4 at some point in the season. So they pretty much beat all of the best teams that year except for Ohio State, but they didn't play Ohio State. This team obviously had NFL talent all across the board, and Chase, if allowed, would have gotten drafted this year as well. He did elect to sit out his junior year because this was the year of COVID. He did plan on playing this year, but it just ended up not being in the cards for him. So after being a part of one of the greatest college teams ever, he had to take a year off from playing in actual football games. That didn't hurt his draft stock whatsoever, though every single one of us in Cincinnati knew that we were drafting Ja'Marr Chase to go with Joe Burrow. Honestly, the only thing that us as Bengals fans were worried about is someone grabbing Chase before we could with the number 5 pick in the first round. Luckily, though, the teams with the first 3 picks all had quarterback issues. Jacksonville takes Trevor Lawrence, the Jets take Zach Wilson, and the 49ers take Trey Lance. The team that I thought might take Chase was the Atlanta Falcons, but they did not. They went at tight end Kyle Pitts. Would the Bengals have taken Kyle Pitts? I think we were going with the wide receiver anyway. I think they would have went with Jalen Waddle next instead. But man, that could have really changed some shit. Luckily, that is not what happened, and Chase was selected with the number 5 pick in the draft. Burrow and Chase would reunite with the Cincinnati Bengals as Burrow was taken with the number 1 overall pick of the year before. Everyone is excited to see how these former college teammates will do on the pro level. And so, during the preseason, they were watching Ja'Marr Chase drop some balls, and there was a huge deal being made about it in the media and on social media. You can't let people forget that because of this, there were people questioning if Ja'Marr would make it in the NFL as a wide receiver. After week 1, that would quickly disappear as Ja'Marr Chase got back to doing the gritty and flexing on people real quick. Funny enough, Ja'Marr Chase's first NFL game would be against Justin Jefferson's team, the Minnesota Vikings. Chase and Burrow would get the win in overtime. Ja'Marr's first game ended with 101 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Jefferson got to keep the same LSU football colors, while Chase got to keep the same type of tiger stripes. Ja'Marr put the rest of the league on notice, scoring 4 receiving touchdowns in just the first 3 games of his NFL career, along with an average of over 70 yards per game on the receiving end. This Bengals organization early on would find a lot of success. They were 3-1 after 4, and they were 5-2 after 7 games. And as we would come to find out, it wasn't just beginner's luck. During this season, and especially at the beginning of it, this team was really hard to get a beat on. Teams weren't even sure who the number 1 wide receiver was on the team. T. Higgins was a second-round draft pick in 2020, the same year that Burrow was drafted. He had over 900 yards in his rookie season and was well on his way to 1,000 before Burrow went down with a devastating season-ending injury. Tyler Boyd, who would eventually become the number 3 wide receiver on the team, was the number 1 guy before T. Higgins in 2019, and he had over 1,000 yards in 2019 and also in 2018. Oh, and by the way, they were also one of the best running teams in the league as well. Joe Mixon had over 1,500 all-purpose yards to go with 16 total touchdowns. So, you get the idea. This was a potent offense. And because of the organization drafting guys like Burrow and Chase, they also spent over $200 million on defense this season, setting this squad up for a deep playoff run that only Cincinnati fans saw coming. What an incredible season for Jamar. Chase was the AFC Offensive Player of the Week twice this season. In both of those games, he had over 200 receiving yards. In Week 17 against the Chiefs, he had 266. Go with 3 receiving touchdowns. That's the most yards given up by the Chiefs to any one receiver ever in a single game. That's also the most that a Bengals player has ever had in one single game. Because of things like Jamar's stellar play against the Chiefs, the Bengals locked up the AFC North Division with the win against Kansas City, giving Cincinnati their first playoff berth since 2015, which would ultimately give Cincinnati their first playoff win since the 1990-1991 season. Chase was awesome in his first playoff win, with 116 receiving yards and 23 rushing yards to go with it. Not only did Chase get to experience the playoffs in his first year, but he also got to experience the Super Bowl in his first year. The Bengals would see that same Chiefs again a month later in the AFC Championship and would again come out on top. During the regular season, Chase was 4th in receiving yards and 3rd in receiving touchdowns total. He won the Offensive Rookie of the Week 5 times, and he was the Offensive Rookie of the Year for 2021. And everyone talks about what he did in the regular season this year, like they should, but I don't think enough recognition gets put on him for what he did in the playoffs. Chase had 368 postseason receiving yards, which is the most ever by a rookie, over 100 yards more. While Chase and the Bengals did not win a Super Bowl this year, this was absolutely a successful season. Chase set rookie, NFL, and Bengals records. So Jamar with LSU had an outstanding college season, one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time in college. And then the next year that we see him playing in actual football games, he dominates again as a rookie in the NFL. So what would Jamar do for year 2 in 2022? A lot more of the same. Though Jamar missed 5 games in this season, he was still able to get over 1,000 yards in a single season. He's never had less than 1,046 yards in a single season, and he has over 3,700 in his first 3 years. Chase, in those 12 games in 2022, was able to snag down 9 receiving touchdowns. The Bengals finished with a better record than last year at 12-4, and they did make it back to the AFC Championship game again, but this time the Kansas City Chiefs got them back, where the Chiefs would go on to win the Super Bowl. In Chase's third year, the 2023 season, quarterback Joe Burrow just wasn't right or flat out too injured. So for the first time, Chase and company would not be making the postseason, despite still being able to finish 9-8. Chase missed one game but had 100 catches for 1,216 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. And like he said after week 4 in 2023, Chase is always open. Back when he got drafted by the Bengals, he said he was going to break every Bengals wide receiver record. Didn't know how he was going to do it, but he said he was going to. And since day one, I believe him. As a Bengals fan, but more so just a fan of great football, I'm excited to see Jamar take the field again this year. I think he's going to have maybe his best season of his career. And if you like mini documentaries like this about football or about basketball players, then here's a video or two of them up here, with more players of different sports coming in the future, so stay tuned for that. We also do videos on championship teams that you can check out as well. And there's a lot more NFL content coming your way than just that, so stay tuned for that as well. But that's it for me, guys, and you'll catch me in the next one.